Ég heiti Guðjón Bergmann, þetta þátturinn í leit að lausnum. Gestur minn í dag Maxine Gaudio. Hún var að gefa út bók sem heitir Ferðalagið að kjarna sjálfsins. Og af því að hún talaði ekki annað en ensku, þá ætlum við að tala ensku í dag. So we're going to change to English. Welcome.
He's sorry and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I don't have a choice yet.
We're talking to the red.
I don't have a choice yet.
To speak in English.
Just to give you my profile.
Yeah. I read through your book this weekend.
Did you like it?
Yes, I did. It's a personal journey, you know.
It's a part of a personal journey.
Yeah, it's a part of it. And what I'd like to get over to the viewers today is a little bit about your story, of how you got to this point of being who you are, and also the message you have for the Icelandic people at this moment and time, and then we'll just fake the rest.
Fake the rest? I'm for that.
So just tell me a little bit about yourself and how would you, at this moment in time, how would you describe yourself?
Oh. This is the best time in my life ever. Although I have felt that way about many times in my life, this is definitely, at this moment, the apex of everything. It's the height of everything for me. Because when I wrote the book, it is a lot biographical, but I wanted to explain to people how you start like this and how you can end like that. Not in a mess, but that you can end up feeling really good about yourself and good about everything that goes on and being aware and letting your consciousness, as it were, change. Because you drop your resistance to things and you really don't talk about flowing, you flow. And this for me is what's nice, that it's 60-something, which I shouldn't say publicly. I came to Iceland, I began crying when I had to leave, and so I just moved here. But I did that at an age that most people don't do it, and I certainly didn't do it to retire. I had done a book in English, and then Jan Olafsson said, wouldn't you love to have it in Icelandic? I'm a resident here. I thought, oh, fantastic. I can give this to Iceland because I feel it's my country.
And you've been holding talks.
Jan and I have been talking everywhere often.
Yeah. And what's the reaction?
The reaction is amazing. First of all, it's amazing that they come. And the second thing is that there's a lot of interaction between us and the people. Because I ask a lot of questions, as you would imagine, like, who were you more like, your mother or your father? Because it's the beginning of finding a pattern, or your grandmother or your grandfather. And I say, by a show of hands. And in the beginning, you know, Icelanders, nobody had parents. Nobody had grandparents. Nobody raises their hand. That's it. There's nothing. But then, you know, slowly you start to see it all happening, and we start to get a group that's much more together and involved. And I usually begin it with the relaxation, and breathing and how you can use breathing. But I started off like, I suppose, any other little crazy person. And from this, I was interested in yoga by the time I was 13, and in those days, people were not only not interested, they really didn't know what it was.
And it really had some stigma on it, right?
It had a stigma because I was not only a weirdo, it was like, what can we do with our child?
Yeah, she's into yoga.
She's into something really strange here. So I was reading a lot of psychology. I became a psychologist, this kind of thing, but everything was fascinating to me, and it was fascinating about how you could control maybe not the external environment, but you could control your internal environment. And that if you learned not to be so affected by your external environment, and that you were not so affected by authority figures, and you didn't cause yourself in some way to either become a rebel, as I did, or to become a victim, as others do, that life could start to smooth out. Fortunately, I learned early. But early for me was most of the work that I do now, I did 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, they would have burned me if it was another time. My parents educated me very well, and they didn't understand why I was doing this kind of thing. I worked in the street with homeless children in Guatemala and Honduras, and, you know, I mean, I did unusual things. And I think that's why this time is so great. It's like I feel that Iceland is the reward for me. You were rewarded by being born here. I was rewarded, and I chose to come here. This is the most phenomenal country that exists in the world. Maybe people will say I'm naive, or that I'm just over, I want to say effusive, but it's not, that I'm over enthusiastic about things. But there's a reason for it. It exists here. The energy here is incredible. The individuality is incredible, but there are still a lot of difficulties with that individuality. So,
could you give examples?
Sure. I don't mean to take the whole.
Yeah. No. Could you give examples?
The problem then becomes is how do you take, as an example, Iceland is 300,000 people. This for us is maybe 2 towns in the United States.
Maybe 1 street in New York.
For sure, 1 street in New York.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean it's 6 million people in New York.
Yeah.
If you consider that this country began as farms and this kind of wonderful, strong background, and that you didn't lock your doors, and this is what Jon and I also speak about. How many of you didn't lock your doors when you were growing up? Okay, life wasn't easy, but if something happened in the neighborhood, so to speak, we would help out. We would join together. If some child had a problem, or there was a problem with a sick parent, somebody brought food. Things were neighborly. Whether they liked the neighbor or not, this was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I think now that if you want to really change something in the world, you have to transform yourself. And this is really what I came to, because as a young person in my teens, I wanted to change everything. I wanted the world to be beautiful and people to be peaceful. I worked at the UN. I worked in foreign countries, and I had this idealism that it was possible to change everything, because it's so simple if you don't get it political and
you just do this and this and this.
Yeah,
and that's
simple.
It. Yeah.
People just do basic things instead of getting complex about it. Just do it, as Nike says. But it doesn't work that way. And I saw too much for too long a period of time with people dying, and dying for political reasons, and just people living in the street. And I lived in the street with homeless people for a while to get the feeling of it. And I began to realize that I was burning out from it. And the only thing that I could do was to change me. So I went through a huge transformation. My reward was Iceland. I wanted to write about the work that I did. I mean, it's not just psychic work. I began to do a kind of mental work with people, because most of your life is all of your thoughts and your feelings, the smells, tastes, are all in your cells, in your body and your muscle memory. When you learn yoga, or I do Tai Chi, not as often as I should, but I was doing it 6 days a week, every day for a long time. But your muscle memory is what helps you. I went to a class, and I said, how am I going to learn this? I write it down. And then I thought, well, I never wrote it down to ride a bicycle. And I'm paying for it. So if I learn it, I learn it. And if I don't, I don't. But I learned it right away because I gave into it. So my book is basically about how I started, how I believed in nothing, how I read just to disprove everything, and how I became a big believer, very convinced.
That's really, you know, Joseph Campbell's work?
Oh, I love Joseph Campbell's work.
He talks about the difference of being a priest and being a shaman.
Yeah.
And the priest is somebody who's almost like a government worker.
Yeah.
And the shaman
very political in that.
Yeah. And the shaman is a person who has had the experience.
Yes.
So what you're really a shaman.
Yeah.
You have the experience.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference for people to connect to the experience. But here's my question. You know that it's replicable, right? You know that you can...
I not only replicate it, I teach it.
Yeah, you teach how to do it. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, is that whatever somebody else has done, if they know the recipe, they can
you're beautiful. You're just beautiful.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm giving the recipe in very, very simple terms.